Sammy Davis has a gorgeous home. I went out and visited him. The landscaping, the shrubbery and the trees. See, I come from Philadelphia, and I lived in row houses. We never saw that, shrubbery and trees. So if ever, the good Lord willing, I ever become a star and I move to California, I'm going to get a home with lots of trees, because I realize now that a house without a tree ain't fit for a dog.
In his final days, Joey Bishop broke his silence about the Rat Pack, exposing the betrayal, the million-dollar deals he turned down, and the shocking reason Hollywood erased him. This is the story America's favorite comedy group tried to bury. Born Joseph Abraham Gottlieb on February 3, 1918, in the Bronx, Bishop grew up in a struggling Jewish immigrant family. When he was just a baby, they moved to South Philadelphia, where humor was a way of life. Surrounded by tight-knit Italian and Jewish communities, Joey quickly developed a sharp wit, imitating actors like Edward G. Robinson and Jimmy Durante. School wasn't his strong suit, and by 18, he dropped out to help his family financially. But even through hard times, humor never left his home. His quiet, deadpan delivery set him apart. He could make people laugh without raising his voice. Encouraged by his family, he entered comedy contests, winning just enough to prove he had something special. Joey's first real break came in vaudeville. He and his brother formed the Bishop Trio, later the Bishop Brothers, performing in rough clubs across Pennsylvania and New Jersey. The pay was low, the crowds were tough, but Joey adapted. He learned to read a room, switch jokes on the fly, and refine his signature dry humor. Then, World War II changed everything. His act dissolved when members were drafted, and in 1942, Joey himself joined the U.S. Army. Even in the military, comedy stayed with him. Performing for troops built his confidence, and by 1945, he returned to show business, now as a solo act. He hit the club circuit hard, performing in small venues like the Casablanca Roadhouse in New Jersey. His self-deprecating, subtle style was different from the loud, slapstick comics of the time, but it worked. By the late 1940s, he was earning $1,000 a week and performing in top venues like the Greenwich Village Inn and the Latin Quarter in New York. Television was the next frontier, and in 1950, Bishop landed appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show, gaining national exposure. But his biggest break came in 1952, when Frank Sinatra caught his act at the Latin Quarter. Impressed by Bishop's timing and delivery, Sinatra invited him to open at Bill Miller's Riviera. Soon, Bishop was performing at the legendary Copacabana, and with Sinatra's backing, his career skyrocketed. He became known as Sinatra's comic. But he wasn't just riding on fame. He had his own battles to fight. Because behind the Rat Pack's glamour was a truth Hollywood didn't want the world to know. Joey Bishop had something different from other comedians. His humor was never loud, mean, or exaggerated. He didn't rely on wild performances or insults. Instead, he mastered self-deprecating humor that made audiences feel like they were in on the joke. He called them folks, making every show feel personal. He didn't just tell jokes, he told stories. One of his favorites: how his family was so poor he had to use his cousin as a sled in the winter. It wasn't just funny, it was real, and people loved him for it. In a world of big personalities, Bishop stood out by staying calm and confident. While Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. soaked up the spotlight, he was the quiet force that kept the Rat Pack's humor sharp. They called him the Frown Prince because of his serious expression, but his dry, effortless wit made their performances unforgettable. His journey with the Rat Pack began in the early 1950s when Sinatra saw him perform at the Latin Quarter in Manhattan. Impressed by Bishop's natural, unforced delivery, Sinatra made him his opening act, a move that changed everything. Soon, Bishop was performing in front of sold-out crowds, sharing the stage with Hollywood's biggest names. By 1960, the Rat Pack was a cultural phenomenon. Their legendary late-night shows at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas blended music, comedy, and unpredictable antics. But few knew that Bishop wrote much of the material. His sharp timing made their banter feel spontaneous, and his perfectly timed one-liners kept the show from going off the rails. He wasn't just part of the act, he made it work. Beyond the stage, Bishop starred alongside the Rat Pack in films like Ocean's 11 and Sergeant's 3. But his biggest moment came in 1961 when he hosted John F. Kennedy's inaugural gala. The Rat Pack had backed Kennedy's campaign, and this event cemented their influence. Bishop effortlessly blended humor with the night's elegance, earning laughs even from the president. "I told you I'd get you a good seat," he quipped as the Kennedys arrived. The crowd loved it. But behind the scenes, tension was brewing. By the early 1960s, Bishop's relationship with Sinatra began to crack. The breaking point came when Sinatra asked him to fill in at the Cal Neva Lodge, a resort Sinatra partly owned. Expecting unquestioned loyalty, Sinatra was furious when Bishop instead handed over a list of demands: $50,000 and a private jet. To Sinatra, it was a betrayal. He had given Bishop a place in the Rat Pack, helped make him a star, and now Bishop was acting like he was doing Sinatra a favor. That didn't sit well. Sinatra cut him off immediately. It wasn't just about losing his spot in the group. Sinatra made sure Bishop was erased from major projects. Robin and the Seven Hoods had originally included Bishop, but he was replaced. The message was clear. He was out. The fallout hit Bishop hard. He had always been the least flashy member of the Rat Pack, but now he was an outsider. His attempt to gain respect had backfired, leaving him bitter. He wasn't just angry at Sinatra, he was frustrated with an industry that seemed to push him aside. Peter Lawford, another Rat Pack member, could relate. As JFK's brother-in-law, Lawford had connections, but often felt like an outsider, his political ties overshadowing his acting career. While he and Bishop never clashed directly, they both understood what it was like to be sidelined. For Bishop, the rejection stung. Big events moved on without him. When Johnny Carson was chosen to host a major charity event, something that once might have gone to Bishop, it was clear he was being replaced. Hollywood had moved on. Bishop rarely spoke openly about the fallout, but he never forgot it. In interviews, he made small remarks about being undervalued, a quiet reminder of the betrayal that cost him everything. Joey Bishop hated how the media portrayed him, as if he had been lucky to be in the Rat Pack rather than earning his place. No matter what he did, his career was always tied to that past. He had been part of something legendary, only to be pushed out. That wound never fully healed. Joey Bishop fought to stay relevant. In 1961, he starred in The Joey Bishop Show, but despite a strong cast and guest stars, ratings floundered. NBC canceled it in 1964, and CBS briefly revived it, only to switch back to black and white, a move that doomed the show. One lost episode, featuring JFK impersonator Vaughn Meader, was scrapped after Kennedy's assassination. In 1967, Bishop challenged Johnny Carson with his own late-night talk show, featuring Regis Philbin as his sidekick and surprise Rat Pack guests. But Carson's grip on late night proved unshakable. In a desperate stunt, Bishop staged Philbin's on-air resignation. It made headlines, but couldn't save the show, which was canceled in 1969. By the 1970s, comedy was evolving. Richard Pryor and George Carlin were redefining the genre with personal, boundary-pushing humor. Bishop's old-school style felt outdated, and he refused to adapt. His industry connections faded, and by the 1980s, so had his career. Occasional film roles, The Delta Force, 1986, and Mad Dog Time, 1996, directed by his son Larry, kept him working, but not in the spotlight. Through it all, his marriage to Sylvia Rusga was his anchor, lasting 58 years until her death in 1999. Their son followed him into Hollywood, but their relationship remained distant. Joey Bishop had been part of something legendary, but in the end, he became the one thing every comedian fears: forgotten. Despite feeling overlooked, he never betrayed his friends. Publishers offered millions for a tell-all book after Sinatra's death, but he refused. Loyalty meant more than money. By 2005, his health declined, and he passed away in 2007 at 89, the last surviving Rat Pack member. Though the world may not have fully appreciated him, Joey Bishop knew he had been part of something great, and that was enough.